Donc cette table ronde sera en anglais, c'est écrit normalement dans le programme. Désolé pour le délai, merci à ceux qui restent avec nous. So we have talked a lot about AI applications for the industry. We will now focus more on AI applications that concern society as a whole. Là, ça marche. After two AI winters in the mid-70s and the 90s, AI has been booming since the 2000s, thanks to big data, computing power, and the development of machine learning and deep learning algorithms. This has generated numerous applications in many fields, such as transportation, as we've seen, but also for health, justice, education, marketing, finance, task automation, and also for recommendation and decision support tools. With a great success for most of these areas, one can also hear regularly stories about AI being guilty of discrimination or lack of transparency or difficulties to handle unprecedented situations, thus raising ethical concerns such as the use of personal data, the bias in data and algorithms, the decision-making management, and the prospect of a replacement of the human by the machine. So, threat or opportunity, danger or promise for a better society. Our roundtable will discuss how society welcomes AI today, with on the one hand its exceptional performance and on the other hand some risks. This will lead us to address the relationship between the machine and the human, how this relationship affects human behavior, and also the public policy considerations and efforts that are needed to support to ensure trustworthy AI. To do so, I'd like to introduce our speakers. So first, Jean-François Bonnefond, who has a PhD in cognitive psychology. You are also a senior research director at CNRS, president of the European Commission Expert Group on the Ethics of Driverless Mobility, head of the AI and Society program at the TSC Digital Center, and chair of Moral AI at the ANITI Institute. Laurence Calandry, you have a PhD in public law and you are professor of public law at the University Toulouse Capital, director of the Master Digital Law and co-director of the Master Media and Communication Law, and researcher at the Institute of Space, Territories, Culture and Communication Law. And you are also the first vice president of the Toulouse Capital University. And finally, César, you have a PhD in physics. You are a senior researcher at the University of Toulouse, director of the Center for Collective Learning, chair of Augmented Society at the ANITI Institute, and also honorary professor at the University of Manchester and visiting professor at Harvard School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. You are also the founder of DataWheel, a company that provides solutions for big data analysis and visualization for complex managerial decisions. I'd like to start with a question for you, César. What are the biggest advances of AI in AI and their applications, and how do they affect our society?
Okay, so thanks, Corinne. So I think we have seen this year AI has matured very quickly on some areas that 5-6 years ago were considered unthinkable, and what we have seen is that AI has become much more creative than we expected. Like a few years ago, when people were talking about AI, we were talking about predictions, we were talking about business, we were talking about the economy, but we're not talking about the film industry, we were not talking about the creative industries. And what happened is that what we have seen, and many of you maybe have even played with this, is that this year there has been almost like a race in which every 2 or 3 months we see tools that are able to generate images. Last week, there were tools that were able to generate now full videos based on prompts. And there's a whole reconfiguration of key industries that comes with that. So in the video game industry now, there's a big exploration of how to use these technologies to generate backgrounds, to generate characters, to think about things. In the animation and the film industry, of course, this is something that is transformative. In the stock image industry, now well, do you want to generate an image? Do you want to use a stock image? Like generating image is still slow, it takes like 15, 20 seconds to generate an image, but you get full copyright. So when you generate an image with a stable diffusion in your own computer, you have the copyright for that image, and that in itself is important from a business decision. So on the one hand, AI has become very creative, has become very good at generating images, very good at generating text. If you ever played with GPT-3 or any of those language models, they can be quite good at summarizing, identifying points of a piece of text and so forth. And now it's moving into video. So on the one hand, I think one of the big advances is on the creative industries. Other things that have been interesting is that AI also is now being used to help develop, algorithms. There was this paper recently in Nature of an AI that is able to develop a better matrix multiplication algorithm. There's a bunch of caveats. It's not for like very large matrices and so forth, but this is an algorithm that had not been improved by people over a long period of time, over 50 years. So 50 years, people have not improved that matrix multiplication algorithm. They haven't found a way to do it with less steps. And that shows also that AI of this inductive form is helping solve some logical puzzles as well. Some puzzles that would be considered to be more of the realm of logic than the realm of statistics. So I think we're kind of like an interesting place in which we have AIs that are quite generative, and we have now people that interact with these technologies, not in a way in which you are passing on, a decision-making power to a technology, but you are passing on to this technology like questions, you're getting answers, and you have like a feedback loop in which you're generating knowledge together with the machine as one of your teammates.
Thank you. Jean-François, as a researcher on moral AI, can you give us some insight on how AI impacts our social standards and norms, and how it may raise ethical questions, maybe with other examples?
Sure. So there are at least 3 big categories of situations where we have to consider the social impact of AI through a moral or ethical perspective. The first and perhaps most important category is when the action of AI has a critical impact on humans. So this is, for example, the case with self-driving cars, where lives are at stake. But sometimes, the action of AI do not have life and death consequences, but have consequences important enough on humans that we would want the AI to make decision in a way that is aligned with the moral values of humans. That was one. The second category is when humans and AI have to cooperate to achieve a beneficial outcome. So when cooperation happens between humans, well, it is supported by a lot of social norms, emotions, moral values, but all these ingredients lose their power when humans interact with AI. That is, the infrastructure, the psychological and social infrastructure for cooperation between humans does not exist yet for cooperation between humans and machines. And so we have to monitor, study, explore these shifting social norms that are starting to build for how humans interact with machines. And the third category, and I'm not going to go too deep into it, is situations where the machine, the AI, act as a mediator between several humans and transform human relations. Maybe a quick example, for example, is nowadays we have vocal filters that can transform your voice in real time, which are starting to be used in call centers, for example. You call customer service, a human is responding to you on the phone, but in real time, there's an AI filter that makes the human sound cheerful and helpful and kind. So the human is not even making any effort to talk nicely to you because the AI is doing the job of transforming the voice so that the human sounds nice. So in this situation, you might think, well, maybe it's a win-win. You get to speak with someone nice. The person on the phone does not have to do the emotional labor of sounding nice to you. So perhaps there's no issue here. But we do have, even in these categories, in these examples, to wonder what's going to happen once the technology is massively available. Once it's not only call centers, but anyone who can just activate this kind of stuff on their phone or in their camera, how is the fabric of society going to change once we realize that we no longer interact with each other, but we interact with each other through machines?
Thank you for this very revelative example. Regarding applications, Laurence, how the government is taking advantage of AI capabilities, and what are the stakes of such an appropriation by the public bodies?
Thank you, Corinne. Sorry, I'm going to speak in French. I know, César, you speak very well French, so I'm going to speak in French. So, je prendrai comme exemple deux illustrations qui témoignent d'une part de l'intelligence artificielle comme déjà mobilisée par la puissance publique, l'Atos Insu, et l'intelligence artificielle rêvée en quelque sorte par la puissance publique, et ce à travers deux rapports qui ont été récemment publiés et qui témoignent de cette mobilisation par la puissance publique, ou l'impuissance publique d'ailleurs. Donc le premier rapport, c'est un rapport de l'Observatoire européen de l'audiovisuel qui a souhaité mettre en lumière les usages de l'intelligence artificielle dans le secteur des médias, comme César l'a relevé, et plus particulièrement dans le secteur de advertising online, de la publicité en ligne, et a notamment mis un coup de projecteur sur l'autorité française, donc c'est la raison pour laquelle je parle un peu en français, l'autorité française de régulation de la publicité professionnelle, que vous connaissez peut-être pas, qui s'appelle l'ARP, on adore les acronymes en droit, donc l'ARPP ou l'ARP, qui a développé, alors pour la situer, pardonnez-moi, juridiquement, c'est très intéressant en droit de la régulation, de voir comment la régulation en matière de communication commerciale est une régulation bicéphale, en ce qu'il y a une autorité de régulation publique, qui est l'ARCOM, que vous connaissez peut-être, qui est née en janvier 2022, c'est le CSA adopisé. Ça vous dit peut-être quelque chose, il y avait la Hadopi, le CSA, les deux ne font plus qu'un, c'est l'ARCOM. Donc l'autorité de régulation qui est régie notamment par une loi du 30 septembre 1986, et depuis très longtemps, cette loi prévoit qu'en matière de publicité, de communication commerciale, il y a en réalité une double régulation, une régulation publique et une régulation privée, de l'auto-regulation ou self-regulation, et donc de la co-regulation avec le régulateur public. Et cette self-regulation, cette auto-regulation, elle est effectuée par un organisme, une association, loi 1901, qui existe depuis très longtemps. Ça s'appelait avant le Bureau de vérification de la publicité, et progressivement, dans l'évolution de sa composition, mais on y reviendra parce qu'elle a intégré des consommateurs, notamment pour lutter contre le greenwashing en matière de publicité, cette autorité a été auto-qualifiée d'autorité de régulation de la publicité professionnelle, et donc à une assise légale en droit français et en droit européen également. Et l'Observatoire européen de l'audiovisuel a mis l'accent sur cette instance. Pourquoi ? Parce que depuis quelques années, pour analyser, j'ai l'anglais qui vient, les contenus publicitaires, notamment en ligne, elle s'est dotée d'un outil d'intelligence artificielle qui s'appelle Invenio, pour vérifier, par exemple, pour les influenceurs ou autres sur les réseaux sociaux, est-ce qu'il y a de l'alcool, est-ce qu'il y a du tabac, etc. Parce qu'il y a des lois qui s'appliquent en la matière, et que c'est plus facile avec un outil d'intelligence artificielle d'aller vérifier que tel ou tel influenceur ou influenceuse vont utiliser tel ou tel produit qui sont illicites. Donc là, on a un exemple d'utilisation déjà en acte par la puissance publique, l'Atos Insu, de l'intelligence artificielle. Plus récemment, vous avez un rapport qui a été publié il y a quelques jours, il y a un gros dossier devant les yeux, mais je vais vous épargner la lecture, du Conseil d'État, qui s'appelle « Pour une intelligence artificielle publique au service de la performance publique ». Donc là, on a vraiment le Conseil d'État qui met les pieds dans le plat de l'intelligence artificielle publique, en considérant qu'il faut une intelligence artificielle publique, long chemin, en considérant qu'il faut une autonomie, une souveraineté en quelque sorte en la matière. Et on passe d'une IA qui est déjà mobilisée à une IA rêvée. Donc il y a une sorte de cartographie des usages par la puissance publique, nationales, locales. Ça va de la mobilité urbaine en passant par les smart grids, Linky qui est bien dans l'actualité, etc. Donc, il y a une sorte d'état des lieux, de cartographie des usages. Il ne parle pas de révolution de l'IA dans les usages publics, mais plutôt une progression, une expérimentation graduelle avec une question, mais à laquelle on ne va pas répondre de suite parce que je suis déjà trop longue. Quel modèle de régulation pour cette IA que la puissance publique souhaite mobiliser dans ces différents usages pour, je cite, un service public hyper performant, ouvert 7 jours sur 7, 24 heures sur 24.
Thank you, Laurence. Okay. So we've talked about the situation in France and in Europe also. César, since you've spent a large part of your career in the US, can you compare what you can see here in France and in the US regarding the regulation of AI and how the public bodies can use it and in which conditions?
Yeah, and the state of AI. So one thing that I'm afraid a little bit that AI in Europe is going to be like nuclear energy in Germany, okay? There's going to be something that we're so afraid that we're not going to have it, and when we need it, we're going to have to buy it, maybe not from Russia, like in the case of gas, but we're going to have to buy it from someone else, And the reason is that when you think about a technology like artificial intelligence, you are in presence of a technology that is highly tradable, okay? AI is very exportable because the way that it works right now is that you train these algorithms in large computer clusters, and then you access them through APIs. So therefore, there's a big fixed cost of developing, a well-trained algorithm like the DALI 2 or, the GPT-3 and so forth, and a very small cost of selling it. So you can use it for cents, and, that scalability, what it generates from the perspective of economic geography, when something is hard to build and requires lots of knowledge, but easy to transport because it has lower transportation costs, economic geography tells you that those activities are going to be performed in few parts of space. So we are in a world in which we're facing a race from an industrial perspective to a new type of platform technology, like a technology that some people could develop and could distribute massively. And in that context, Europe doesn't seem to have any horses in that race. I would challenge the audience to say which are the 3 biggest European AI companies, or the best demos that came out during the last year, and we would be hard pressed to find examples. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. Like in the web, we had something similar. Like the web developed in Europe, we did pioneer regulation, but the result has been that the incumbents now, which have, of course, big teams of lawyers, are even more ingrained than before, because that regulation being born here first doesn't give an advantage to European companies to compete in that space, a little bit of the contrary. So I do think that that's a little bit like what we have kind of here in Europe. Like the analogy, again, I would say AI is in Europe what nuclear energy is in Germany.
Maybe Laurence, you want to react regarding maybe the AI Act and the fact that we are taking into account the fact that we need to let new players emerge in this field.
Oui, alors je continue en anglais, mais pour rebondir sur ce que vient de dire César, effectivement, il y a vraiment une ligne de crête qui est embrassée par la Commission européenne et les instances de l'Union européenne, à savoir une velléité de régulation, mais surtout ne pas refaire, et je cite, l'erreur du RGPD, pour éviter de brider les initiatives et les innovations et les initiatives françaises et européennes. Donc, il y a cette ligne de crête entre, d'une part, réguler, oui, mais sur la base de principes quand même suffisamment généraux pour ne pas brider l'innovation. Car le RGPD a eu cet effet-là pour une part, d'où un certain nombre ensuite d'interrogations. Alors, peut-être que j'y réponds de suite ou pas, mais voilà, enfin, voilà, c'était, en tout cas, cette ligne de crête, elle est présente dans l'élaboration actuellement du règlement sur l'intelligence artificielle, effectivement.
Okay,
Ne pas brider l'innovation européenne.
We'll come back indeed to that, but to continue with the big players, Jean-François, maybe based on your work on social credit, you could tell us about the situation in China compared to Europe.
Yeah, because something big is happening in China at the moment. Maybe the biggest social experiment in decades. So it involves the massive use of AI to observe the behavior of humans online and offline, and to aggregate all this observed behavior into a single individual score that tells everyone how good a person you are. So that is called a social credit score system. So the thing is, there are many, many ways you could imagine how a social credit score system might work. But because China was the first mover, the specific choices that China made for their social credit score system have come to define the conversation, including in Europe. And because the choices that China made are frankly a bit scary, the conversation had taken a very negative turn, to the point where the European Commission in the AI Act is considering a complete and total ban on social credit system in the Union. So this is understandable, but in the spirit of not, freezing innovation, or at least social innovation, maybe as scientists and citizens, we need to find a little bit of space to consider whether some version of social credit systems might be beneficial and acceptable to most, even if they're certainly not the version that China is experimenting with.
Yeah, acceptability will be a key point for the AI applications to take off. So, Laurence, you already mentioned the GDPR and this example. So, indeed, AI needs a lot of data and personal data to have good results. So, how the GDPR is used by the public power?
Alors, pour rebondir sur ce qui vient d'être dit, effectivement, sur le projet de règlement qui est en cours de discussion sur de régulation sur l'intelligence artificielle, ce qui a été énoncé, c'est vrai qu'il y a par exemple un principe d'interdiction, en tout cas, de tout système de notation sociale. Pour autant, j'ai une métaphore qui va me venir, mais c'est peut-être parce que j'ai faim et comme vous, c'est la métaphore du gruyère. J'ai l'impression que cette régulation qui est en gestation, il y a une volonté de pas reproduire le RGPD en laissant le plus possible de possibilités à l'Union européenne et aux États membres la possibilité d'innover. Donc, même s'il y a des interdictions, on voit que... Voilà. Et alors ça se traduit concrètement dans le projet, mais également dans d'autres domaines plus spécifiques, par ce que l'on appelle en droit les bacs à sable réglementaires, que vous connaissez peut-être, les sandboxes. Alors, il y en a quelques-uns qui ont été créés justement dans la lignée du RGPD. D'ailleurs, le Conseil d'État, dans son rapport, dit bien aux administrations publiques, vous pouvez communiquer entre vous les données publiques. Il faut aller vers libérer les données d'intérêt général, même si ce sont les plateformes qui les détiennent, parce que voilà, les administrations, les États et autres en ont besoin. Donc, et pour ce faire, le bac à sable réglementaire, les sandboxes, sont des outils qui viennent comme des éléments qui viennent pour une part amoindrir la dureté apparente du RGPD. Et donc, on retrouve cette même dynamique dans le règlement en cours de discussion sur l'intelligence artificielle, c'est-à-dire la place à la certification. Et le Conseil d'État est assez pessimiste sur la place de la France dans le mouvement de la certification et de la normalisation en général. Et de dire notamment, je n'ai plus la page en tête, mais de dire la France est très bonne en législation. Elle est beaucoup moins bonne en certification et en normalisation, donc à pondérer selon les champs. L'Allemagne est forte et les géants du numérique aussi. Donc, et la bataille va se faire là, et il évoque d'ailleurs un changement de paradigme normatif. C'est-à-dire que c'est là que l'intelligence artificielle va être définie, c'est là que l'intelligence artificielle va être régulée dans le détail et non pas dans le règlement en général sur l'intelligence artificielle, qui va laisser des angles morts, mais à bon escient pour laisser développer une initiative qui permet de faire générer en tout cas des géants français et européens de l'intelligence artificielle, pour répondre un peu à ce qui était dit à César. En tout cas, c'est l'utopie qui est poursuivie par le Conseil d'État et la Commission européenne, peut-être utopie. Alors, il y a un exemple concret juste, c'est sur les données énergétiques. Voilà, sur les compteurs, notamment Linky, les compteurs intelligents. Là, il y a un bac à sable qui a été créé par la Commission de régulation de l'énergie et la CNIL, justement pour libérer les données énergétiques. Et la crise énergétique actuelle pose avec une acuité particulière la question de nos consentements à l'utilisation des données énergétiques. Donc là, c'est une question qui était déjà dans les tuyaux, pardonnez-moi ce mauvais jeu de mots, mais qui ressort avec une acuité particulière. C'est que fait-on des données? Qu'est-ce que EDF et les énergéticiens peuvent faire des données au regard de la crise énergétique que nous vivons et que nous allons vivre? Et donc là, il y a un certain nombre de réajustements qui sont en train d'être opérés pour pouvoir utiliser de manière plus ample les données énergétiques qui sont collectées par les énergéticiens pour répondre à cette crise. Voilà. Donc là, on a des bacs à sable réglementaires qui sont en cours et qui vont être mis en application. C'est la même chose en matière de santé, sur les EdTech, etc. Voilà. Beaucoup de bacs à sable réglementaires qui sont déployés pour remédier au RGPD. Donc disons que le règlement sur l'intelligence artificielle vise à combler quelque peu et tirer les leçons des défaillances du RGPD.
And the way to generalize from the sandbox to the general case is clear?
Oui, il y a cette idée-là d'être dans des phases d'expérimentation et ensuite de généraliser. Mais même le Conseil d'État, dans son rapport, dit qu'il est urgent de ne pas réglementer. Tenons-nous-en à des lignes directrices.
Thank you. We mentioned acceptability, and the use of personal data is one of the issues regarding the acceptability of AI. What do the social sciences say about AI acceptability today?
Okay, so first, it's really difficult to say something general about trust and acceptability of AI that would be true of all domains of applications, right? Maybe I can say one thing about general, but that's going to be a bit boring, which is that the general driver of acceptability and trust is performance. At least there's that. You know, the first question that people have in mind before they trust AI is how good it does, what it does, and especially, is it better than humans at what it does? So that's going to be about the number of mistakes that people allow before they take away their trust. A secondary issue is not only the number of mistakes, but the distribution of mistakes. You know, are they fair? Or are they, for example, concentrated on groups which are already vulnerable in society? So that's, I suppose, the only general thing that people will care about: the number of mistakes and their distribution, performance, and fairness. But beyond that, every time you're going to apply that general principle to a specific application, you're going to run into specific psychological mechanisms, which are going to be specific to the application. For example, in medical AI, we know that people worry about performance because of something very special, which is that they overestimate the exceptionality of their medical profile. That basically everyone believes they're very special, much more special than anybody else in physical terms. And they're worried that AI, because they're so special, is going to be unable to make an accurate diagnosis or to provide accurate treatment. In self-driving cars, it's a bit like this. Basically, if you tell people that thanks to automated driving, we're going to, say, reduce the number of collisions by 20%. Okay, that sounds good, right? But that's a reduction of 20% compared to the average human driver. And so people ask themselves, okay, but I am like 80% safer than the average human driver. So if I actually get into a self-driving car, I'm losing in safety. And because everyone thinks they're like 80% safer than the average driver, no one wants to get in your car that's 20% safer than the average driver. So you see, every time you go into a different application, you're going to have to ask a very specific question about how people estimate the human performance, how people think about the limitations of AI in this specific domain. So unfortunately, that means we have to restart the work every time again, you know, for a new domain of application.
So how do we measure the impacts, and who is involved in this question of how to measure each time that we have a new application, for example, who is involved in this thinking. For all of you, I think you all have something to say about that, because it really involves the relationship between the machine and the humans and how we work on that.
Okay, I'll start. I'll give the mic. So, so whenever we are faced with a situation where AI is making, well, choices that fall into the ethical domain or with ethical consequences, we want, generally speaking, to align the decisions of the AI to the ethical values of humans. Now, the problem is, whose ethical values? Who do we ask for their values so that we can align the machine to those values? So, for example, if you asked that question to ethicists, professional philosophers, and I do that a lot, they tend to tell you, just ask me. Right? No need to ask anyone else, because I'm the professional. I'm the one who studied morality and ethics. So no need to ask, for example, random citizens. That's, of course, that would make my job simpler. But you can't really do that. You have to ask a bigger range of citizens about what they would like the machines to do. But then you run into other difficulties like, okay, just one example. You know the concern that because AI is trained on human decisions, it will learn the human biases, and then that means we run the risk of AI just scaling up discriminations that already exist in society. Okay, when you talk to actually discriminated people, people who are discriminated against by humans, they are more likely to trust AI. Essentially, they know how bad the situation is firsthand because they experience it, and they think it cannot be made worse by AI. They're willing to take that chance just to, just because they know how bad the biases are. Okay, so what do you do with that? Do you say, oh, well, they are the first, impacted, so we should listen to their preferences? Or do you say, no, we should discard their preferences because they're not informed enough, they're not making the right decision here? So are you going to listen to them or be paternalistic and tell them they're wrong? So again, always we face these issues of who should give their opinion and what do we do with it?
So you wrote the book on how humans judge machines, and I think it's a key understanding to assess the acceptability of AI by society.
Yeah, so it agrees a lot with what Jean-François was saying. On the one hand, there is this dimension of performance. Like when we look at AI, we tend to be very consequentialist in our moral philosophy. So we care about what happened. We don't care what the AI was intending to do or what was designed to try to do, And that generates some key difference. For instance, we tend to be very unforgiving to AIs in accidental situations, So we are in a position in which we're going to be using different moral philosophies to judge humans and machines. We do this probably quite automatically. So we don't know that we're using a different moral philosophy. It's just that we're judging on a scenario in the way that is natural to us. And it happens to be different when we randomize people into these two groups. So in that context, we do have kind of like that a strong obsession with the consequences. And sometimes when we look at the research, we tend to focus on other things. For instance, the explainability, which doesn't seem to be what drives acceptability. So for instance, you have experiments in which people have asked people to place financial bets with financial advisors that are machines or humans. It's easy to make a financial advisor that is a machine, just pick stocks with some sort of algorithm. And the machine has a better performance than the human advisor. But when you show the picks that the machine made to a human, and they get to see the mistakes, they're less likely to go with the machine, even though it generates better financial returns than the human. Because as Jean-François was saying, like we tend to overinterpret our capacity. So say like, I would have never sold, Tesla at 500. I'm not that stupid, And you start basically over-interpreting their mistakes. You start believing that everything that the machine got right, you would have gotten right too, because of course you're smart, and then you tend to side with the human financial advisor, and you lose money because in these experiments, the subjects get paid at the end of the experiment depending on the returns that they obtain. And that shows also that opening the black box, this idea of explainability, is not simply that if I understand something, I accept it. Is often when I understand something, I'm going to interpret it in some sort of convoluted way based on human psychology. I might even reject it because now I have a better way to justify my rejection, and that's a lot of the way in which the mind works. Sometimes we feel wrong about something and then we move ahead. Yeah.
Coming back to who is present in the reflections on AI deployment regarding law, what can you say?
I was thinking about what you were saying. La question, la Lone, de ce que vous avez énoncé, c'est il y a une vraie réflexion depuis très longtemps sur la place des utilisateurs ou des consommateurs, notamment dans les instances de régulation indépendantes. C'est vraiment un serpent de mer. Le Conseil d'État, dans son rapport sur l'intelligence artificielle, je n'ai pas d'action au sein du Conseil d'État, mais il me semble que c'est important de le relayer aussi. C'est un moment comme cela qui le permet. Dans son rapport sur l'intelligence artificielle publique, énonce que voilà, il faut une instance de régulation pivot qui serait la CNIL, justement, pour permettre cette articulation entre le RGPD et la future régulation sur l'intelligence artificielle. Oui, mais alors quand on regarde dans le détail, je vise la CNIL, mais il y en a d'autres organes de régulation, c'est vraiment une question sensible, c'est la place des consommateurs et des utilisateurs au sein de ces organismes. Bien sûr, il y a des consultations publiques. Du 11 octobre au 27 novembre, vous allez pouvoir répondre à la question, tac, 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 mais qui participe voilà. Il y a énormément de questions qui obèrent un petit peu la manière dont ces consultations publiques, bien sûr, elles sont importantes, ces rencontres sont importantes, l'ouverture à la société civile est importante, mais quand on regarde la composition du collège de la CNIL, du collège de la Commission de régulation de l'énergie, le collège de la Commission de l'ARCOM, etc., on se rend compte que les consommateurs n'existent pas, les utilisateurs ne sont pas présents. Donc là, il y a une vraie question démocratique. Et puis, il me semble qu'il y a des outils qui existent, par exemple. Alors, même si on n'a peut-être pas tous la capacité de répondre, vous avez évoqué ce problème de même si on m'explique, je ne comprends pas, ou en tout cas, je vais comprendre avec des biais qui sont les miens, je suis plus intelligent que la machine, ou je conduis mieux, etc. Il y a des techniques qui peuvent exister, c'est la technique référendaire, et bien peut-être que l'intelligence artificielle pourrait faire l'objet de ce type de technique, mais bon, voilà, ça fait partie de notre débat sur la manière dont on associe ou pas les utilisateurs et les citoyens dans cette construction d'une citoyenneté numérique, mais qui impliquerait que l'éducation au numérique soit une éducation pour laquelle il y ait de véritables moyens et ne soit pas seulement à la fin d'une loi au titre 10 où il y a une sorte d'incantation. On parlait d'oracle tout à l'heure, et bien c'est un peu la même chose, d'incantation sur l'éducation au numérique.
Thank you very much. A lot of things have been said. We are coming close to the end of this roundtable. Thank you very much for the knowledge you've shared on the links between AI and society. So yes, AI is already very present in our daily lives, but its acceptability relates to a lot of questions if you want to reap AI's positive outcomes. I have one last question that could be something as a conclusion. Some article says that winter is coming for AI, a third winter, and that it might be for societal reasons or for not meeting society's expectations. Do you think it might happen this third winter? And what makes you optimistic regarding AIs in tomorrow's society? And then we'll open to the questions of the participants.
Yeah, so the previous AI winters have been situations in which research on AI has not captured funding, in the same way in which it was a few years ago. Yeah. So in the 50s, when AI starts growing, there is this symbolic AI craze and everything, and then they overpromise, they don't deliver. There is an AI winter and so forth. Now, I think though we are in a different situation in which AI, in many situations, is not depending only on public funding. So there might be an AI winter in public funding, but when you look at, for example, like until recently, like Google's annual research and development budget is 25 billion. The NSF budget is 7 billion. So it basically has, 3 to 4 times the NSF just in that company. And they're also bringing AI to product in many cases, so they do have units that have, some revenue streams, they have, good teams of engineers. So that part, I think, is much harder to bring into a winter than the part of the AI system that depends on public funding, which can change. It can be that it's all about now, like how to protect ourselves from the nuclear winter, and the money starts going in that direction because the European Commission decides that's the next direction. Well, fortunately now we're in a situation in which it's not just about public funding anymore. So I do think that the winter is less likely to happen everywhere. Yeah.
Alors, c'est difficile de rebondir sur ce que vient de dire César, mais juste en mot peut-être de conclusion, ouverture, Winter is coming. Alors, je vais garder la métaphore audiovisuelle, cinématographique. Le rapport du Conseil d'État, encore une fois, en exergue, se réfère au film de James Cameron, Terminator, et dit cette phrase: rien ne peut l'arrêter. Et je la mettrai en parallèle avec des propos qui ont été récemment tenus par le vice-président du Conseil d'État, Bruno Lasserre, ancien président de l'autorité de la concurrence. Le droit de la concurrence comme outil important de régulation des plateformes, entre autres. Et dans un discours qu'il a récemment tenu, il a dit « Rien ne peut plus arrêter la légitimité de l'intervention publique ». Alors, sous quelle forme, sur quel format, quel modèle de gouvernance, tout ça, ce sont des questions qui sont ouvertes, mais il fut un temps, on nous a pu nous dire que le cyberespace était un espace où les États n'avaient pas droit de citer. Aujourd'hui, en tout cas, ce qu'on a pu gagner, c'est la légitimité du principe même de l'intervention publique. Donc rien ne peut plus arrêter non plus l'intervention de la puissance publique. Donc non, winter is not coming. Public bodies.
Une question de la salle, je ne sais pas si... You're not too hungry? You can take 1 or 2 questions. I don't know.
Oui, bonjour et merci pour cette table ronde qui était passionnante. Vous avez expliqué que l'IA s'était fortement développée dans les arts créatifs, notamment pour générer des films, des vidéos, tout un tas de contenus. Ces contenus-là peuvent être utilisés pour créer ou propager notamment des fake news. Et on sait bien que la guerre de l'information devient prépondérante aujourd'hui dans les crises du monde. Comment vous voyez un moyen de se prémunir d'une utilisation trop forte de l'IA pour manipuler les foules par la propagation de ces fake news? I can translate if you want, César. Y a-t-il un moyen de s'en prémunir?
I really don't know. I mean, but to be honest, I mean, there are always going to be bad actors. Whatever the technology you invent, you cannot insure against bad actors, and then it becomes a matter of enforcement to fight them. But it's true that I tend to take the stance in my research that I'm only concerned about what good people are going to do with the technology, because even good people are going to do really bad things without understanding. So I'm not even going into the bad people territory.
Après, le droit essaie de... Voilà, il y a quelques lois quand même qui sont qui ont été adoptés sur les fake news au niveau européen. En ce moment, vous avez un texte qui est en cours de réflexion qui s'appelle le European Media Freedom Act. Et dans ce texte, il y a aussi une prise en compte par l'Union européenne de encore plus aiguë, parce que jusqu'à présent, la Commission européenne, elle se contentait de guidelines. Et là, avec le European Media Freedom Act, il y a l'idée d'aller vers un peu plus de droits durs et en visant notamment, comme dans le Digital Market Act, les plateformes dites systémiques et les réseaux systémiques. Donc, on passe d'une régulation qui était une régulation prêt-à-porter vers une régulation qui est plus haute couture en ciblant certains opérateurs. Donc ça, c'est intéressant en termes de trajectoire régulatoire. Ça ne répond pas entièrement à la question, mais voilà.
Oui, merci pour cette intervention. Effectivement, des problèmes de fond, des questions de fond. Ma question est très liée à la précédente, notamment, mais tout d'abord en commentaire, n'utilisons pas le terme innovation quand il s'agit purement de profit. Déjà, il faut bien mettre les valeurs des mots. Et deuxièmement, vous avez fait une métaphore très illustrative vis-à-vis de on aura de l'IA innovante, soi-disant, en Europe, comme on a de nucléaire en Allemagne. Mais ma question est combien de Tchernobyl IA, genre Cambridge Analytica, on peut avoir encore avant de bien réglementer ce cadre. Merci.
Can you help me a little bit? Translate?
There is an analogy between nuclear and yeah. So what about regulation to avoid Chernobyl?
Yeah, I can say it in English.
Chernobyl.
So yeah, my first comment was let's say let's not say innovation when we mean profit. And the second one, you said that nuclear, you will see innovative AI in Europe as we see nuclear industry in Germany. But how much more are we willing to accept Cambridge Analytica scandals like Chernobyl of AI, if I may follow the same...
What would be the Chernobyl of AI?
Sorry?
What would be the Chernobyl of AI? Like what?
Cambridge Analytica would be some...
Cambridge Analytica.
Yes.
Okay, but like I can go
Okay.
into the details of that one. So Cambridge Analytica was an example in which information about people was collected through an app that was designed to play like some sort of psychology game, and then was used to target ads, you know? And by transferring that information from the people that collected that information through the app to, you know, the people that use it to run the political campaigns, there was a change of hands that was illegal. But funny enough, the Obama campaign had the same information, but they had collected in the Obama for America app on Facebook in the previous election, and therefore there was no illegal change of hands, but there was also targeted campaigns, you know? So in some sense, is it an AI thing in that case, or is it like, you know, data and targeting in the context of marketing, which is very old? You know, you have been targeted based on your location, you have been targeted based on your age, you have been targeted based on your gender for a long time, and now this was being done at scale. Do you need AI for that, or maybe with like 20 ifs you can do 10 to the 20, meaning a million segments? That's not AI, you know. So I don't know if Cambridge Analytica is a Chernobyl of AI. It's actually the scaling of all marketing techniques of segmentation, you know, in which in this case they use data from psychological tests, not only demographics, which help make that segmentation maybe more precise and accurate in defining the messages. But still, the other segmentation was not useless, you know, like you want to target differently, like a 60-year-old, you know, retired person than a 27-year-old, you know, like person that is thinking of a utopian future when it comes to politics. So I don't know if I would count that as something that is AI-driven, you know, because it could have been done with normal, simple methods. you know, and I don't know if I would count it as a Chernobyl because it's really widespread. I get called, you know, because I work with data by people that run campaigns in different parts of the world, and I say I don't do that job, but everybody, you know, is targeting, you know, people in precise forms with ads, you know, and there's a lot of money that gets spent the 2 weeks before the election because that money is going to be useless, you know, the day after the election. So there is also kind of like a big spending spree that has to happen at the end of the segment. But is that AI? Is that politics? You know, where's the problem there? You know, is it on the incentives that we have for our elections, or is it that we're using technology?
Psychological question. I mean, I don't have an answer, but I thank you, because now I'm thinking, you know, what could actually constitute a Chernobyl-like event for AI in people's mind? And nothing comes to mind easily, and except some existential risks. But thank you for prompting thoughts.
Maybe we have time for one question, and then yes. Which one? Okay. Excuse me?
Hello, thanks a lot for the talk. Mine are almost two questions intertwined with each other. The first one is, you talked about it a bit during the debate, but how do experts and non-experts change their priorities in terms of how they the prerequisites for certification of AI, or what we ask for AI? It was talked about in terms of the marginalized groups and non-marginalized groups. But for example, people are academics with respect to non-academics. And how do you think this could drive policies as AI literacy becomes more common ground, as people interact more with AI, the news comes out for AI, the fake news, the art news. People are starting to understand more what AI can do. And how do you think this could drive changes in policy for the future?
Oh, no, thank you for for pointing your finger in that direction. I mean, this is so hard because, you know, as a psychologist, I used to study things which were relatively static. You know, why do people help each other? You know, why would people fall in love? These things are pretty much stable from thousands of years. But now when you study how people think about AI, it seems that things like you described, the dynamics between what happens in the news, AI literacy growing up, new challenges, new ethical questions being raised, it seems that everything is subject to change. Every attitude, every preference seems subject to change and might no longer be true in a couple of years. So right now, the only thing we can do is to treat that as an empirical question. We don't have theories. We just have to collect data for a time that is sufficient to, you know, start understanding the dynamics. Actually, we've been trying to do this now because we have this project called the Moral Machine Experiment, which is a website that is collecting opinions on what self-driving cars should do. And it's been active for 6 years, and now we've reached 100 million responses through 6 years everywhere in the world. And so now, maybe with only this data set, we are in a good position to track place by place and month by month the evolution of attitudes linked to what's going on in each place at each time.
Yes, a quick one. I'll try. There seems to be an underlying assumption in what all of you are saying, is that innovation in AI comes at a price, which is a manageable diminution and decrease in our individual freedom. You mentioned SCCS. Okay, you say, well, you know, if we take a firm stand against it, we will impede innovation. You mentioned GPDR, okay, which is a failure. You said, you know, innovation in the US is coming at a faster pace than it is in Europe. Okay, but there's also the Patriot Act, okay, in the US, the FBI and the CIA can instruct Google, okay, to give them all of my data. Okay, so, you know, isn't that, you know, the starting point of what we should be discussing? Because if, you know, innovation, if it has to come at a price of an infringement of my personal freedom, this is the Chernobyl of AI, and it has happened already.
Yeah, so innovation always comes with risk, you know, because innovation is about development of technology, and technology is about the development of capacity. And how we use that capacity, of course, can always be positive or negative. But at the end of the day, the ones that get to put the rules of the game are the ones that are on top, you know? So in a way, in a world in which innovation happens elsewhere, growth happens elsewhere, you know, and what we try to do is to protect ourselves from that forces. Are we going to be strong enough, you know, once the imbalance grows, you know, to be able to put the rules of the game? And I think we see a little bit of that geopolitics already playing. So while I do agree that, yes, there is a world in which we might want to choose, you know, what gets done or not, we live in a world in which many people get to choose what gets done or not. And there is a battle eventually among them, you know, a battle in terms of finance, a battle in terms of, you know, political power. And in that case, I would say if you want to help change the game, you cannot do it from the sidelines. You have to get into the pitch and try to do what you think should be done right. You know, you have to lead by example. And if you're not able to lead by example, it's going to be very hard for you to be able to generate in the world what you want to see. You know, it's just going to be commentary, but the other person that is playing the game might take it or not. Usually they don't. Usually the players, you know, don't listen to the crowd that much, you know, so you have to play.
Juste un mot. Non, mais là, dans les rapports que j'ai cités, mais il y a une vraie question, c'est celle des moyens qui vont être attribués aux autorités de régulation pour faire appliquer les lois qui sont déjà présentes ou qui vont être adoptées. Et l'IA, il y a une sorte d'inéluctabilité dans l'utilisation publique de l'IA. Voilà, moi, autorité de régulation, si je veux pouvoir contrôler ce que fait Google et consorts, il me faut aussi utiliser voilà, l'intelligence artificielle. Donc, donnez-moi les moyens juridiques, donnez-moi les moyens humains, donnez-moi les moyens matériels pour pouvoir exercer cette fonction de supervision publique que je ne peux pas exercer en l'état. Et tous les rapports annuels ou autres qui sont publiés tournent autour de cette problématique de l'adéquation des moyens par rapport aux missions qui peuvent être prévues, aux obligations et pour corriger les asymétries de régulation qui existent actuellement.
Okay.
Thank you very much for bearing with us until this time, and thank you very much to our speakers.